Welcome to another installment of our ongoing Nonprofit Leadership and Engagement series. I am Joanne Nazer, Manager of Nonprofit Leadership and Engagement at the Washington County Community Foundation. Thank you for joining us today to learn from our content experts about creating and utilizing or spreadsheets. Our presenter's bio and photo are on the WCCF website. So I am pleased to introduce my colleague, Emmeline Ferguson, or Em.
Thank you, Joanne. So welcome everybody here today. I just want to say thank you for joining us as we discuss the ins and outs of Excel. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can everybody see the Excel spreadsheet now on my screen?
Can you speak up a little bit? I don't know if everybody can.
No, I can't hear her.
Okay, yes, I will speak a little bit louder. And can everybody see my screen now?
That's better. Whoops.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so like I said, we're just going to go through a basic overview here. So a few opening notes. Your Excel may look a little bit different than mine, but that's just going to be dependent on the version that you're currently using, which will, be related to your individual subscription to Microsoft. So here at the foundation, we use the Microsoft 365 Business Suite of products. So that's what you're going to see. If something does look a little bit different and you need help finding it in your version, definitely let me know and we can navigate that as well. Due to the varied user levels in the room, we are going to start with a general overview of where to find things in the software, and then we'll take a slightly deeper dive and do some graphs and charts and talk a little bit about some pivot tables. But feel free as we're going along to stop me if you have any questions or to drop them in the chat as well. So Excel is obviously a very vast and robust program, so please do not be discouraged if you are struggling to understand or remember certain features as we go along. As with all of these sessions, the recording will be made available on our website afterwards, if you need to go back and rewatch anything. But I also wanted to just go ahead and note right now, Google is also your friend when you're working in Excel. There's a lot of really great documentation on there and walkthroughs for, if you need to learn how to use a different function or anything like that. So, never be afraid to Google something as well, but also the foundation. We are here as a resource. We're happy to help you one-on-one with any projects that you may be having, or if you just have questions, that are more related to a specific project that you're doing, definitely let us know and we're happy to work with you and be a resource as well. And so with that, let's dive in. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to start with the general overview. So I'm just going to kind of walk through where you're going to find your basics in Excel. So obviously, when you go to file, this is going to give you access to your opening files, your save, your print, anything along those lines. It's also where you're going to be able to find some account and user details. So this is how I know that we are using the Microsoft 365 business for apps. So that's the one that we have here. But like I said, whatever version you're using may display differently there. Okay, so back now to the home tab. This is going to be all of your very basic functions. So, you can change your font size here, your text size, anything like that, bold, italics, any of those types of setting things, any type of outline or borders, that you want to have displayed so that way to make your text easier to read. All of those types of things can happen here, as well as, all of these things that I have filled in. You can do the fill text color, you can do the text color, and you can always expand these too using these little arrows that pop up. And they're gonna, provide you even more options, within all of those categories. Same with alignments, you can change where things are aligned in the text box. If you want to change everything to right or left, you can always make those changes as well, or do everything centered. Once again, alignment, you can make that larger, you can change the angle of your text, anything in those regards, that's helpful for you for whatever your purposes are. As you can see on these ones up here above my little graphs that I have here, you can change the merge and center. So that way, that just makes it a little bit easier to read and shows that I'm grouping this all together. And it'll just take those three and just, put them all together as one text box now instead. The next thing is, your format for your numbers. So typically, Excel defaults everything to general, but you may want to change that if you have some specific data. So over here, you can see we have numbers. Right now, they're just a series of numbers. There's nothing special about them. You can always add your comma here. which would change it to accounting. You can even change it to something like currency if you wanted to see your dollar signs and all of that. And you can also change, your decimals too. So if you always want to see rounded numbers, you can remove them. If you want to expand it out to see more detailed numbers, you can always provide that too. One thing here that can be really useful is this conditional formatting. So what it can do is if you take a range of text or cells in Excel and you click on the conditional formatting, the one I like to use is the highlight cells rule, and you can do that by duplicate values. And it'll ask you, do you want to highlight the duplicate or do the unique? So, you want to highlight the duplicate, and it's going to tell you that it's going to fill it in red with a red text as well. So you can click OK. And now you can see that in here, we have all of these things are duplicates. There are multiple blues, there are multiple oranges, greens, etc. So that can be really useful. We use that typically with mailing lists. If you did a mass export for a mailing list and you want to see if there's duplicate addresses or anything like that, that can be a quick way for Excel to help you pinpoint that data, because then you could always filter and sort by that. So let's say we want to filter our data now. We could say we only want to look at the things that are highlighted. So now we know we can review our data there. That way, the duplicates that Excel identified for us. So that can just be a useful, helpful tip, that you can always utilize in the system. You can always clear that as well once you no longer want to see that highlighting. Okay, we're going to come back to format as a table in a little bit, but you can also quickly, insert and delete rows. So, you can highlight anywhere you want to and start inserting. Same, you can start deleting. So, that's a quick way to clean up data as well. This one over here in the editing, you can always do a quick auto sum. So for any calculations that you're doing, if you have donation amounts or anything like that, that you want to see the sum quickly for, you can always highlight what you're looking at and just click auto sum. And you might have to expand your size there, but now you can see it's going to provide that total for us. So it's just going to take those calculations, and you didn't have to provide any formula there. Excel just does it automatically for you once you select that. And if you change any of these numbers, your number is going to change as well. So now that's just always going to be looking at those and making sure that it's the correct amount. We just went over how to sort and filter, but all of those options are here as well. So if you wanted to change a certain set, you can turn on your filter toggle, and then you can start by saying, I want to do by A to Z, or I only want to see, I want to select that I only want to see, certain colors in the list. And it'll go ahead and make those changes for you. Okay, so that's pretty much the home tab. Like I said, those are just the basics for your formatting purposes. Next, we're going to do insert, and this is going to be anything that you want to add or embed in your Excel workbook. So we're going to come back to this in a little bit when we talk about charts and pivot tables, but you could also do pictures or shapes or anything like that, here as well. For page layout, this is going to be more related to your printing option. So what you see right now on my screen is the normal Excel view. You can always change that. If you go down in the bottom corner down here next to where the slider is for your zoom ratio, you're going to see that the normal view is highlighted, but you could always change it to your page layout view. So if you want to see what's appearing on a certain page that's going to print, and then you can always change your margins, your headers. You could change the orientation to be landscape or portrait. This would give you your print preview for how that's going to appear. Or you can do a quick view. This is just going to show you quickly where the page breaks are happening, on the workbook. And that's same with these little dotted lines that you see that are going down. Those are also showing you quickly where the page breaks are for printing purposes as well. Okay, so next we're going to go over some formulas. We are going to spend a little bit of time here in the formulas. So this is a functions library that Excel already has built into its system. And as you can see, there are lots of options here. And they all come with different uses and everything like that. So you do typically need to know what you're looking to do and what function you'd want to use, but just know that there are certain ones that appear here that are already built into the system that'll give you a walkthrough of how to, get the correct information back out once you start to use it. So we're just going to go over a couple of the basic ones that I think can be really useful that I know we've used in the past. And with that, we're going to start with the count if function. So this one right here is we're going to do it on this color option here. If you go to more functions, statistical, then you scroll down a little bit, you would see count if. And a dialog box would pop up whenever you want to use this. And it's going to give you an option to provide a range and the criteria to look for. So for the range, it's going to tell you right here that the range is the range of cells from which you want to count non-blank cells. And then if you click into the criteria box, it changes and it tells you that the criteria is the condition in the form of a number, expression, or text that defines which cells will be counted. So here, like I said, they're going to give you a little user guide, to help you pinpoint what data you want to look at. But now I can go ahead and tell it, so I want to look at the range, and I can just go ahead and highlight what cells make up my range. And for the criteria, I can just pick a color that I want it to count. So let's say I want to count green. And then as soon as I click OK, you're going to see that a 2 appears there, which we can see up above. That's accurate. There are 2 greens in this list. And at any point in time, now that we have that in that cell, that formula, you can see that in the formula box up here, that's what's now displaying. So at any point in time, you could say, well, I don't want to look at green anymore. I want to look at blue instead. And now it's going to tell you, well, blue appears 4 times in the list. So that would be an example, like a time where we've used that in the past. Is like, once again, I'll go back to a mailing list example. You want to look, at how many people are from Canonsburg, let's say on your mailing list, but it's hundreds of lines. You could easily say in the state column, I want to look at, this is the column I want to look at, and I want to see anywhere where Canonsburg appears. And you could easily see how many people you're targeting in that given area. So that's just one use for it. But like I said, it can come up in other times, and it can be very useful. Okay. The next one I'll show you is text split. Once again, I'll use a mailing list. So let's say you did a data export, but you only exported the full names for your mailing list, and you like to see the first name and last name separated so that you could sort, or so that you could put a greeting in your letter, anything like that. Rather than having to redo your export or having to sit here and manually make those changes, you can just have Excel go ahead and move the text apart for you. So what you would do is right here when you're in, select your first name box here that you want to put it in. So for us, this is going to be J4 is where we want this to start. And then if you go to the text dropdown, let's see, if you scroll down a little bit, you're going to find text split automatically in the list. And once again, that arguments box will pop up and it's going to walk you through what you need to select. So first, you're going to need to tell it what text you want to split apart. So in this case, we want to do I4. That's where our full name appears. The column delimiter, that's going to be what Excel needs to be looking at to actually break apart the text. So we have 2 names there that are separated by a space. So that's all that we're going to need to put in there. Anytime Excel sees a space, it's going to say, okay, we need to split this text apart. So now if you click OK, you can see it fills it in, John Smith moves over into these separated columns. And now that we also know that it's functioning properly, at this point you can highlight that and you can drag that down, that formula down, and it'll automatically apply then to the other data pieces that you have in your table there. So, like I said, once you know that it's working properly, exactly how you'd like it, you can quickly apply it to the rest of your spreadsheet. If you have, let's say, a couple hundred names on there, you can quickly get that data pulled apart. The opposite of that now that we'll do is this concat. So it would be, let's say your export comes out and you have your first name and you have your last name, but you would like to see them merged together as one full name. You can quickly make that change as well by going to the text dropdown again. And here, this time you're going to choose concat from the top here. And once again, an arguments box will pop up and it's going to ask you for the pieces of text that you want to string together. So here we're going to choose John for text 1. And when you click into text 2, we're going to choose Smith. And when you click OK, you're going to see that it puts John Smith together. You might notice, though, that right now there's no space in between his name. So that's not actually how you would want it to appear, obviously in a mailing or anything like that. But now, just like before, now you can see the formula is up above in this formula box. So when you click in there, it highlights the cells that it's looking at to make that statement. And if you click in between them, you can go ahead and with open parentheses or open quotations, close quotations, comma, you can go ahead and manually add that space there. So now John space Smith would appear. And if you needed to pull that, you can drag that down. And now all the names in your mailing list would appear that way as well. And so one other.
If you don't mind me interrupting, we have a question on what if somebody's name was Billy Joe Smith?
Yes.
How would that work?
how would that work?
Thank
Yes,
you.
definitely. So actually what you can do here as well, so let's say if you open up back up that formula box, it's going to let you choose, you know, it'll, as you're going through this, it would let you choose more text. So if you had like a third column name there that you wanted, you could grab, you know, let's say there was data and L, we could grab that text there as well and put it in. So you can string together as much as you need to in the system. As you keep clicking in here, it's going to keep giving you that option to appear. And the same, so that's how you would be doing it if you want to string it together. But if you want to break it apart, it would be the same thing. If you had something like, let's see. Here, if I did, delete this. So if you had something right, so now we have three names that it's looking at. We could do this insert, formulas, text, text split, and we're still gonna say that, you know, we want to split this full name. We still want to go with the space. And when you click OK, now you're going to see that it's still going to break it apart into his three columns. So you can still do both options. You can still split apart multiple names more than two, or you can string together multiple names, you know, at any point in time. And you can always, just like we had done with this one where we added the space, you could do that as many times as you need to in between names. So if you had a middle name always in there, you know, you could put that open quotes and quotes with the space in between all of your cells, and that way it's going to appear correctly in the list. And then once again, you can always, you know, once you have it set up how you'd like it, you can drag that down and it's going to apply to the rest of the list there as well. And you might notice too that, you know, if you were to take this, this is coded as a formula in the formula bar, so it's not plain text. So if you tried, you know, doing anything with this data, it's not going to transfer always correctly because now this formula is looking at a different set of cells than what you were specifying over here. So that may not always be very helpful if you just need to see those names. So you can always take the data there and you can copy it. And you can always choose, if you right click, you can paste as plain text. And now you can see that just their names are appearing as plain text. They're no longer looking at a formula. They won't change if you move them around in your workbook or anything like that. Okay. And like I said, so that's just like a very basic overview of some of the functions. Like I said, those are three that I know we've used specifically for mailing lists or things like that, and they can be very helpful. But there are obviously many, many more within the system. And like I said, when you open up those argument boxes, they are going to walk you through the process and tell you, okay, like what data needs to be defined here, what range, you know, you should be supplying, or what context you need to be giving it so that the correct data is returned for you. But that's another instance where, you know, you could Google that. Also, Excel itself, we're going to show you in a little bit, has really useful help articles that are already embedded that you can access as well. That'll show you the steps you need to go through to work any of these functions in the library. Okay, so then we'll move on to the data tab. So the data tab here, this is just going to be basic information to help you aid in data analysis. So the one thing, like I said, there's a lot on here that, you know, may not always come up. The one thing I wanted to note is data validation. So if you click on data validation for any individual cell or any set of cells, it's going to let you choose what can be entered into that cell. So typically Excel defaults to any value being allowed to be entered. But let's say you have a shared workbook and you need to make sure that only whole numbers or only decimals are added or only dates in a certain format are added. You can go ahead and select that, and it'll you know, kind of lock those fields, and you can even put in an error message to state, you know, if somebody's putting in the wrong data, it'll pop up this error message and say, you know, this has to be a whole number between this range. So like I said, not always necessary, but it is there, and it can be useful at times depending on what you're doing within Excel. Okay, so the review tab, this is really just general review tools. So like, you know, you can see spelling, thesaurus, things like that. And if you're adding comments, you know, like I said, if it's a shared workbook, anything like that will appear here. The view tab, this one's going to be similar to the page layout, giving you those print preview, page breaks, and page layout options. you can always freeze your pane. So let's say you always want to keep that up the top. You can freeze pane so that way when you're scrolling, those things would stay. You can unfreeze those as well from the same, so that's just going to be general layout as well for your visual effect and what helps you in the system. Okay. The next two, I'm not going to say much about them, but I will just note that they are there. There's Automate and Developer. So these are two more advanced tabs that you would need to understand how macros work and how to record them. But basically, they allow you to do workflows within Excel. If you are interested in that, I would definitely recommend taking a higher level Excel course, as they can be definitely more complicated to utilize. So here we have the Help tab next, and this is where I was talking about the embedded articles about, if you need help understanding how to do a certain function or anything like that, we can use the count if one here to start, but you can just go ahead and search that. And you can see right here, it's going to bring up examples of how to use the count if function. So that's directly from Microsoft's user base, and it'll walk you right through the process. Or if that's not what you're looking for, it'll give you other results, that might, maybe meet what you were actually looking for. So this can be really useful. You never have to leave Excel. Everything would be right here for you to grab. Okay, and then the final one is just Acrobat. That's just going to be your tie into Adobe if you have it. So one thing I will note real quick is, right now we just have data in Excel, but none of these are actually fully set up as tables. Tables can be useful in Excel. It's not typically how your information goes in, but you can always format any data set that you input as a table. So we're going to do this one over here. I could highlight this, this area, and I could choose to format this as a table. And this can help visually. Now you can see we have banded rows to highlight what information goes together. But the biggest thing here is that it groups this data together, and it tells Excel that all of this should be understood together and moved together. So if I sort by the full name, everything moves accordingly with it. If I sort by the first name, everything once again moves together. So that's really where the tables can come in to help be helpful, is just to keep your data grouped together so you don't lose anything along the way. You don't forget to highlight the last row and it not get sorted properly in your mailing list, maybe isn't correct or something like that. So like I said, tables are not always necessary, but they can be very useful, and they can be useful visually as well to help you understand and easily pinpoint where the data is changing. Okay, so now that those are like the bare bones of Excel, now that we've done that, we are going to move into graphs and charts. So as you can see here, I have a couple set up already, but I am going to walk through how we got here. So first, I'll just start. I'm going to delete this one. First, I'm going to start with a line and bar graph. So, you're going to have your data in Excel in whatever format it came through, whatever data you're looking at. And you're going to want to highlight that relevant, the relevant cells there and choose Insert. And I typically go with recommended charts because Excel is going to look at that and it's going to say, okay, we understand that your data is set up in a certain way, or these are the types of data points that you contain in your range. So we're going to go ahead and recommend that this is probably the best visual chart for you. So here, we can see what I just had there was the clustered column chart. So that's easy. As soon as you click OK, the chart is going to appear. And as soon as it does that, you can start making modifications to this, but you can easily see now by year, those donations that were coming in. And like I said, there are other options. So this one down here, I had done the exact same thing. I had chosen recommended charts, and then I chose the line one for it instead. So, you could see what meets your needs visually and what tells the best story for you. We're also going to talk about this pie chart over here. And whenever we talk about this one, this is now when I'm going to go over how to make the modifications to this. So you can always change the color. You can change display, the layout, anything along those lines. So here, if I highlight these nodes and I choose my inserts, once again, recommended charts, it's going to recommend the pie chart, and you click OK, you're going to see that it pops up, but that it does look different than what I already have in the workbook. So now we'll go through the changes of how I got from the one on the bottom to the one on the top. So the first thing is when you click inside of here, you can click on any of the texts, and those are just going to pop open a text box that you can go ahead and change your title. So let's just say we call this one taxes. Okay, so now we have that, that's what we want to call our chart, and that's how that's displayed. The next thing, you're going to see this little plus sign up here in the top right corner with your chart elements. So right now we have a legend at the bottom and we just have we don't have anything up on the pie chart itself. So this is where we can start making those changes. So if you go to data labels and you click the little side caret there and click on more options, a side panel will appear. And from here, this is where you can start to choose how you actually want your data presented on there. So right now we have values, but we don't want values. Let's say we want to know percentages. We want to know exactly what piece of the pie each thing is. And we also want to see the categories up above. We want to be able to see easily, what rent is, what insurance is, groceries, all of that. So now those two things are showing and the values are not showing. But rather than the best fit where it's, a little bit clustered and maybe a little bit hard to read, you can go ahead and do outside end. And that's going to just move it and make it very easy to read around the outside of the pie chart. And at that point, you can go ahead and close the data labels and they're going to be go back to here. There is one thing though, we do still have this bottom data legend as well as the legend up around the pie charts. We don't necessarily need both of those. So once again, you can click that plus sign and you can uncheck legend. And now at this point, you are back to just being your monthly expenses. And here are the pieces of the pie as they should be with your percentages and the label for each slice. So from here too, you can also change the color scheme. You can always do Excel. If you go up to design, the chart designs, Excel has built-in color templates. So, that's how I got that one. And now we have the exact same chart twice on here. The other thing though, is you can always just select a single slice of the pie and change that to be any color, that you want as well. So you could always make it match your own color scheme, for your business's purposes. And one other thing is once you are clicked into any of the data here, you can always right click and click on Format Data Series, and Pie Explosion can be useful. It can help create larger gaps between your slices. If it becomes like that, it's something so small that you're maybe having trouble seeing it. You can always expand that out, and you can see that it's going to change, what that space is between each slice. So that is always an option as well. So that's a quick overview of charts. Like I said, there are many versions of the charts that you can always use. So like I said, the recommended charts, Excel is going to tell you what it deems would be best for the data that you have selected. So that can be very useful. You can also always choose any of your own if you know exactly what type you want to build. But like I said, I would use the charts to tell a story for your business or anything like that. So what you can also do is like on WCCF's primary website, if you go to WCCF, by the numbers, and then to graphs, you're going to see here, these are the graphs that we make public. So you can see our grant making assets. We use the column chart for that. For grants awarded and capacity building, we use the pie chart. We think that that's a visually, very appealing on the eyes, and it can tell the story quite easily. And then also for WCCF Gives, you can see with the area chart just how much the day has grown over the years. So depending on what data you're putting in, it's important to understand how those charts will display and what story they can tell, because often they can tell a very quick story without needing to, write up multiple paragraphs or anything like that. They can be very useful. Okay, so those are the charts overviews. And now the last thing we are going to talk about are pivot tables. So here I already have some data put in to save time. And I just did a short table here, but obviously, it could be much larger. Typically when we're doing exports from our database, they can be multiple hundreds or thousands of lines of data. And this is where pivot tables can really be quite useful because they can take that information and they can summarize it for you very quickly. So a task that may seem very overwhelming at first can become a matter of, just seconds and clicks of a button to get out the data that you are specifically looking for. So what we're going to do here is you can see I have all this data put in, so we can go ahead and highlight everything that we want to pull into the pivot. And once again, on that insert tab, you can choose pivot table. And a dialog box is going to pop up that says, what table or range are you looking at, which is what I had already highlighted, and you can see it grayed out over here. And it's going to ask where you want to embed the pivot table. So typically I go ahead and do a new worksheet. For me, that just keeps things clean, but you could also always put it on an existing one that you already have. So when you click OK, you're going to see that down at the bottom here, a new sheet has appeared. sheet 7. So you can always drag that and move it anywhere you'd like and rename it by right-clicking on it and selecting rename, and we can call this. Okay, so now, we have our data on one tab and we have our pivot table on the other. And if you click anywhere in this white box, you're going to see the side panel pop up for the pivot table field. So like I said, my data table is quite small, just so that we can easily understand where the data is coming from. But obviously, depending on how large yours would be, you could have potentially a very long list of data points here that you want to select from and choose what you actually want to appear. So here, let's say we want to see by state how much money was given. So we can select both of those. And what the pivot table does in the background is it takes that information and it says, okay, how many Ohio donations were there, and then it tabulates all of that together here for the sum for Ohio, for Pennsylvania, and for West Virginia. And once again, you can always format any of these, somewhere you want to see columns, you want to see a dollar sign, anything like that. Those options are always available as well. Other than that, you can also say, okay, maybe I don't want to see it by state, but I want to see it by month. So I want to know how much was given each month. You can quickly change that by selecting, deselecting state and selecting month from the fields on the right-hand side. And at which point, now you're going to see those breakdowns instead. You can also always see that data together. So let's say you wanted to see it by state and then by month within that. That's also an option here. And you can see that it puts it in this compact view for you where it puts like the total for Ohio, and then how it makes up that number is by combining these cells here. But you can always change the layout of that. So anytime you're in a pivot table, you're going to see pivot table analyze and design pop up as new tabs in green at the top there. So the design here is going to be how you can change the report layout. You could show it in an outline format, which is going to spread it out into those separated columns. You could show it in a tabbing. Oh, yes.
Sorry, we have a question, and it's, does the original data need to be in a table before turning it into a pivot table?
That is a good question. It definitely can be. That's perfectly fine. It does not have to be. Once again, keeping it in a table does help eliminate that risk of, losing a column or anything like that. But no, like in this case, I actually do not have this set up as an independent table, and I was still able to pull it into the pivot. One difference would be, I think, if you put this as a table. Say I had this formatted as a table. And now I wanted to insert the table. Yes, so when you do that, when you already have the data set up as a table itself, when you go to insert it, you don't necessarily need to re-highlight it. It's going to know that like you already have this data set as a table. We're going to change it now into a pivot table. So that would be the big difference as well between having the data as a table or not having it as a table. But yeah, both options would be perfectly fine in terms of pulling in the information. Okay, so then back to the design tab. Was that the only question so far, Joanne?
That was the second question. Yeah, thank you, Em.
Perfect. So once again, you can be changing that report layout to be whatever you need it to be, like compact, outline, or tabular. And at that point too, you can also always turn off your subtotals or turn them on, and same with grand totals. So for right now, you're seeing an Ohio subtotal. We can always turn those off and they eliminate. So now we only see the breakout by the months. Okay. The other thing that you can do in here is visually, this can help. You can always turn on banded rows. This would toggle between having the headers or columns bolded, for certain data points. And you can also always change the color scheme similar to the table layout, whatever suits your purposes there. You can also, yeah, if you ever did have like blank rows in there, this is how you could insert them. If you need, you would like to see them actually broken apart, you want a separation between the Ohio totals and the Pennsylvania totals, inserting a blank line after each item, that's what would allow for that. On the pivot table analyze section over here now, this is going to be, this section does actually become quite important because similar to what you were asking about that table data, so you still have all of your information over here that's pulling in to your pivot table. But let's say, you change something over here. So we want to change this person's donation to 1,000, you're going to need to tell the pivot table over here that you've changed data. So you can do that by simply pressing refresh. And now your numbers should change and that increased amount should pull in. So it is always important to remember that when you're working with pivot table, whatever your data source is, if any changes are ever happening to that data source, you do need to refresh it so that you get the newest numbers and the latest information into your pivot table and it stays up to date. As well with that, let's say you ended up adding a column of data that you now want to be able to analyze in your pivot table, you can always change your data source as well. And so when you select that, it's going to take you back to what you previously had put in as the data source, and you can always expand it out to include a new column, to eliminate a column, anything like that. And once you press OK, your new pivot table, it'll refresh it, it'll update, and it'll have all the new information in there as well. So those two are actually very useful anytime you're working with pivot tables. The other thing here is this is more for your, what you want to see. If you're ever having trouble, you lose the field list there, you can always toggle that back on and off so you can easily get to your data and change your inputs. Also, if you've noticed, there are these little plus and minus signs next to the states here. So what those are the expand and collapse options. So let's say, because we want to see all of Ohio's data right now, we want to see it by month. If you actually minimize that, it's just going to give you the total for Ohio versus showing that breakout of the months. So you can always toggle that back and forth. But if you don't want to see that there, you can always just change those and turn them off so that they're not present in the table anymore. Same with the field headers. That's really, it's just pulling in the field headers from your data table that you specified. So that's useful, but you could always turn those off if you did not want to see them. And like I said, so that's also a bare bones overview of the pivot tables. There's a lot that can be done with them, but they can really be quite useful for analyzing large quantities of data and summarizing it in a way that's easy to read, or so that you don't have to manually go through and tabulate where everything's actually coming apart. It'll just go ahead in a matter of seconds do that for you. So it can be a very, very useful tool, and that I highly recommend getting familiar with and using if it's something that works for your organization. Okay, so the last thing I just wanted to go ahead and say is, this is everything that we had prepared for today. So like I said, that's a basic overview of the pivot tables, the graphs and charts, and just a general layout of Excel. But obviously that's really just the tip of the iceberg for what Excel can do for you. And it does come down to each, how comfortable you are with the system, and the more you use it, the more you'll understand and everything like that. So it is a very powerful tool and do many wonderful things for organizations. And we at the foundation are happy to be a resource for you in any way that we can be. Like I said, we can always work one-on-one with you to work through a project that you're doing, or if you just need to better understand a certain function in the system, we're happy to do that as well. But one other thing I wanted to mention was that actually, if anybody has a library card through the Washington County Library System, you can utilize their free classes. So I believe they have access to the Gale library courses and Universal Class library courses. And we've had several staff members take both, Excel courses under both sessions and have come back with very, very positive responses to it, that it's helped them in their everyday work and shown them things, that they've begun to utilize day to day. So I would highly recommend. They do have all three user levels. So you can take a beginner course and an intermediate or an advanced, depending on, like I said, how comfortable you are in the system and what information, you are seeking to get out of it. So that can be another way to take a deeper dive if you do have specific questions. And with that, I will open it up if anybody else has any questions.
Well, Em, you gave us a ton of information. Who knew Excel was such a great tool for, all various kinds of practical projects that you can do. You can turn into charts and graphs and things. So we do have a comment that the Gales courses have ended at the libraries.
Okay.
But we do have the universal classes, I know, at least through Frank Sarah's.
Yes, and like I said, we have had staff members take them under both. So we have, I've actually taken the advanced and the intermediate under the universal class, and I did find them very useful, and they're, work at your own pace, so they can fit into a schedule, because they're all online format. So like I said, I would still recommend that.
So, and then if Office people have the Microsoft 365 or Microsoft Office package. Excel is part of it. And
Yes.
so it is part of your package that can be a very useful tool that maybe that the participants haven't realized as yet. So, and it was said that the Monongahela Area Library has Excel on their computers so that, you can go in maybe in practice or,
Yes, and I would say,
someone can help you there too.
yes, that's actually very useful to know. Yeah, like if you don't have access typically to that, software to be able to go to the library to utilize it. And yes, I was going to say, because that, like I said, it can tell a very good story. Data can be very important to a narrative for an organization. Like I said, on our primary website, you can see how we use graphs and charts to tell our story. So, for example, if you're reporting on grant reports or anything like that, that can be another way if you have data points to provide, like I said, a very quick visual to show exactly what happened over the course of, how money was spent or anything like that, the number of people you've helped, those types of things.
You're right, Em. I think it's a quick visual that people can understand rather quickly. If you have a whole large table of numbers, that may be a little more difficult to understand. But if you have a color-coded graph in some format, then you can pick it up easier and people can understand it quicker, I think.
Exactly. And like I said, it
Well,
may seem overwhelming at first to take a dive in, especially if you're not familiar with it. But the more time you spend in Excel, the more familiar you'll become. And I think the more comfortable you'll start to feel, and you can really see just how it can impact your organization.
So we did get a question about, as Em said at the beginning, this has been recorded, and so it'll go on our primary website, wccf.net, within the next several days that it'll be put up, the information.
Okay. Yeah, I
Are
didn't
there
want to leave
any
time
other?
for questions because I thought, everybody uses Excel for different purposes. So I can always do the general walkthrough, but I do understand that sometimes that may not be as useful. Like I said, if you have specific questions, I'm happy to answer them too.
I don't know if anybody wants to raise their hand or type it in the chat. I do think, Excel is quite a tool that for nonprofits to use to share financial information, of course, if they're applying for grants and support, or to show donors that it's a tool that many leaders can use and can share that with.
And I will say too, like for us, with our CRM system, we're able to do exports directly into Excel. So it's a really great tool in that sense too, because we can take data from our database and pull it directly into Excel and start to analyze it. So hopefully, it, like I said, if you have that option, like I said, it can be a very large tool because sometimes this can be very large data exports with like hundreds or thousands of lines. And this can be a good way to quickly group everything together.
I think, Bridget, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, I just had a question about I'm sure you get this a lot, but like the idea that a lot of organizations use the Google Suite. And so like I know Google Docs has a lot of the same functions, but it's not quite the same. Like I was trying to do a big project on there, and I noticed that it's just not as easy to find some of the formulas on here. So I don't know, just yeah, what you think, or if you recommend just using Excel.
Yes, I was gonna say because I have used the Google numbers or like Excel because Apple also has their own. I think theirs are called numbers. But yes, obviously each suite has their own version of like numbers or Excel, things like that. I would say, if it's useful for you, the other one, typically they do have a lot of the same functionality. I have found that Excel is integrated because it's part of the Microsoft suite. It does integrate well with many things. So like I said, for us, our database can export directly into it, things like that. So I would say those would all be considerations to take into account when choosing which one you're working in. But if you're still able to do the same functions, like I said, a lot of it's going to overlap, and be similar. And we could, if you were struggling, I'm sure we could look into that as well. And we could always help anybody that's in a different software figure out exactly what they need to do.
Yes. Em, I think you're going to be busy. We gave out your email. And so, and the phone number at the office is 724-222-6330. So you can reach out, and also on our website too, it has different members of the team that could assist if you have any particular questions.
Of course.
So does anybody else have a question? We all got to practice now. We're going to send Em a chart or something.
And the other thing, like I said about Google, there's also a lot of good like YouTube videos, like I said, walking through. If you did want to learn, maybe you didn't have time for an entire course, that you want to take through the library or anything like that. If you're looking at, specifically how to work with charts or how to work with pivot tables, those can also be useful. Having people they've done presentations and like more of the ins and outs of them. So that's also a resource.
So Em, I know you're quite talented with this, but how do you feel that you got started on Excel? Can you give a brief history of, somebody who's at the beginning stages, let's say?
Yes. Yeah. So definitely when I came to the foundation, I did have an understanding of how Excel functions and stuff, but I hadn't used it for maybe all the things that I use it for now. And so a big part of that just came by, realizing whenever I got to a project, what I needed to do, and kind of taking that deeper dive and looking into it to learn for myself how that worked, to start to learn some of the basic functions that like I typically use. So like I said, within that, the formulas, function library, which ones were useful for the things that I was trying to do, those types of things, and then learning specifically how they worked. You always can learn, your own that you can type or create, but I think that that's a good place to start, is learning the ones that are already in the system and how to provide the correct data for them to return results for yourself. That can just get you more familiar with how the information is related and how it works together and talks to each other to return results for you. So I would say that was a big part of it, realizing as projects came up, learning what I could about the system. And like I said, now at this point, I've spent a good amount of time in Excel through just my day-to-day tasks at the foundation. And that's really given me more confidence in it and the ability to learn more nuances about the system as well. So I do think it's just, it's a software that just takes time to become comfortable with, and it can be very overwhelming at the start, but to not be discouraged or overwhelmed, and to step back, but rather just say, what, I'm just going to take it in smaller chunks. So figuring out that one project that you're working on and what you need specifically for that, rather than trying to like master the whole system and all in one sitting.
Well, if somebody is interested in applying for funding through the foundation, they have to, at some point, submit a budget. And what do you think are other opportunities for nonprofits to use Excel for?
I do think, yes, the budgets, anything like that, expenses, because it can do all the calculations for you. So it is something we always recommend, is that anytime you're doing any calculations in Excel, you should be pulling those numbers in directly through the function of like adding or subtracting, rather than typing in any numbers independently. It just cuts out that room for error, because it's just going to be looking at the cells and it's going to be pulling the numbers together for you. So that's one thing. So obviously the budgets, anything like that, expense reports. Like I said, the charts are another really large one for anything you do. Like we do our annual report that we send out each year. So that's a way that we can connect with our donors and let them know what we've done throughout the year. And while there are still like impact articles in there, that's a quick way to say like, and here's at a glance, everything that you can see, the dollars raised, anything like that. How much money is in each section, or how much money through grants has gone out to each of our focus areas. It can let a donor know where you stand specifically. And two, anytime that, you may be applying for grants, any data that you have to provide in terms of, numbers they're always easy to calculate in Excel, especially if you're pulling that data from your system into Excel. You can easily say, if they want to know, like for instance, for us, they would want to know maybe how much money we've raised or how much we've given out in grants. We can easily calculate that through those exports.
And then it's pretty easy to then copy and paste it into maybe publisher, Canva, or other,
Because I was gonna say, so too,
yeah.
like there is for the charts and everything, like I said, you can do what Excel has here, you can change the color, you can change the font, but like our marketing team then takes what we create and they make their own flourishes to it, to make it match our brand. So that is also important. You don't want to lose like any of your branding through that process. But you still have that ability to, like you said, save it and turn it into another, or move it into another software to finish those steps once you have the data finalized. And same too, if you would needed to just send this out as an attachment, you can always, print any of this, save any of it as like an Adobe PDF, things like that, can become attachments. So let's say you just need to email it to somebody, you can still pull that without giving them the actual Excel workbook where they could be making edits. You could lock that and just say, here's just an image of, what we've created.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's definitely a useful tool that can share the information from a nonprofit to a prospective funding source.
Yes, exactly.
Right, right. And we have a comment here about that it is, yes, it's an excellent evaluation and reconciliation tool that helps verify the data in our other software programs that we always have a checks and balance system.
Yes.
And
yeah,
so
we do a lot of separate schedules in Excel to do just that. So, any type of progress reports that you can be analyzing that data year to year, things like that, but you can always be checking it back to your other software to make sure everything runs.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's a good thing too, that just a comparison too, that you can go back several years and do a chart or something and just see the growth and
Right. So like for instance, we have
changes.
that Give Stay area chart here on our website that you can see. So each year, we update that schedule to include the most recent Give Stay. So once again, it's something that we already have built that year to year. We just need to add the newest data to, and then immediately that chart is updated and it's ready, ready to go. So that's another thing, you don't always have to rebuild everything each time if you are maintaining schedules like that, but, have the data from year to year. It can be a very quick process to update and have something new for your website or for your mailings or whatever you may be using it for.
And we predict it's continuing to go up, right, Em?
Right, exactly. Yeah,
So
hopefully we'll know here in a little bit.
yes, yes, a little over a month away. So we hope everybody's working on that and could be developing charts for that
Yes.
as well.
Right, exactly. For any mailings that you're doing in advance, like I said, so you can tell your story to speak to the donors.
Well, I just thank Em so much and that it's been such an informative session that in so many different ways to present data. And so we appreciate that and that, Em's emails in the in the chat and also the phone number. We're kind of able to be tracked down here.
Yes, exactly. We're happy to help in any way that we can.
So again, thanks for this important issue, Em, and all the information. The next session for the Nonprofit Leadership and Engagement Series will be on Tuesday, October 29th at noon, and it's on the title Revised Salary Levels for Exempt Employees, which is impacting a lot of nonprofits, of course, and businesses as well, but this Department of Labor mandate is started July 1st, and then the second part is starting January 1st, 2025. This will also be a law school for nonprofit session, thanks to Kathy Sable and in her efforts with the Washington County Bar Association. Thanks to all those who participated today, and particularly thanks to Em. And we just heard their motherboard is overwhelmed for some of our participants, but we hope it gets back on board. So I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.